Hello and welcome to the Summary Sloth Book Nook, a podcast about all things books, publishing and more. My name is Emma and today my guest is Carrie Stone. Carrie is an author. Now on with the show. Thank you for coming on the podcast today, Carrie.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so great to have you on. I'm going to be quite biased. I have read Carrie's book and I absolutely loved it. So I have to admit
That's fine by me.
yeah. So it's been absolutely lovely. Well, thank you thank you so much for coming on. I've been wanting to speak to you for ages, so this is a great opportunity.
It is. It's lovely to be here.
Great. So first things first, how did you sort of first begin writing, like just in general?
Generally, well, I've always enjoyed writing stories. I've done that ever since I was a little girl. But my very first novel, I started it when I was a bit bored at work. I used to work in the city of London, and sort of had a really boring job and decided to fill those boring moments with writing. So started a book and did about a quarter of it, put it on a USB stick, forgot about it for 6, 7 years, came across it all that time later and thought, oh, it's quite good. Read it back to myself and thought, oh, I think I should pick this up again and see what happens. And yeah, it all sort of kicked off from there. That was the first book that I finished writing, and I didn't expect much to happen with it, to be completely honest. I've got no sort of creative background in terms of education, so I didn't bother to do university or any sort of courses. So I basically wrote this book and stuck it on Amazon and thought, I'll self-publish and everybody can have it for free if they want to read it. That will be an amazing, bonus that somebody might read my book. And it just sort of spiraled from there. So I've been very fortunate.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's just starting your writing. I think we've all wrote in sort of situations where we've gone, oh, this is boring. I'm going to write something a little bit more interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's always good inspiration as well, isn't it? Because it's like, start writing and then I won't stop writing. So did you ever sort of get like a stint of like, oh, I've got a spark now, I'm just going to carry on and keep going?
Yeah. When I did that first book, it really isn't a great literary read. It's actually, when I look back on it, it's really not that well written, and that's me saying that. But it's fun, and it killed a few hours of reading it and thinking, oh, it's fun. It was good escapism. And so I think once I had some success and, like tens of thousands of people ended up downloading that book, and it made me realise that maybe you don't have to write something complicated, or, you don't really need to necessarily be the best at writing. Perhaps you just need to be a good storyteller. So it inspired me to just write and think, well, I've never written for the money. It's more just telling stories because that's what I love to do. So I thought, if one person reads my story and enjoys it, then surely it's worth the time and effort for just that.
Yeah, of course. As I said, if you do something you enjoy, then it doesn't seem like work at all, does it?
Oh, that's exactly it.
Yeah, great. So obviously, kind of moving on to obviously your novel that came out last year, Passport to Happiness. How did you sort of get the first idea to write it?
Well, I'm in my mid-30s now, and I left the UK when I was about 20, and I moved abroad. And for the last 15 years, I've sort of travelled and lived in many different countries. So I've always loved travel, and it's a big part of who I am. So obviously, because I always write and will never stop writing stories, I thought it would be a good idea to maybe incorporate some of the travelling aspect with the stories that I was writing at the time. And I did that with a couple of my other books, but only touched lightly on it. And in this one, myself and my editor decided maybe I should, draw more from my own experiences, because there's 3 locations featured in that book where I myself have actually lived. And I think it helps when you've lived somewhere, because, you go on holiday somewhere, you can get a rough idea of the country, but I don't feel it gives you the depth of knowledge that living somewhere and being with the locals does. So I felt that if I could just translate my experience of those particular places into a book, and I was, extremely fond of those three places, then perhaps other people could have a taste of those countries and be inspired to perhaps go there. So really, aside of just writing it for, the storytelling and the actual, well, the stories about a woman that goes in search of her happiness, it was also to sort of maybe give those three destinations a little boost, because they really are amazing.
Yeah, of course, because as you said, it's going on holiday to one place is just like one thing. But
Yeah,
I was out in Australia for a year, and I completely sort of like you experience it as like a
definitely.
local, and I can completely like sympathise with obviously what you're
Yeah.
trying to get from it. But the character in it, she is so relatable probably most of quite a lot of people. So I think that's probably why a lot of people go wish they could just sort of go off and do what she does essentially.
Well, this is the thing. Based on my own experience, like I said, I left the UK 15 years ago, and there was no, if you like, financial safety net. There's never been a backup plan for me in terms of having necessarily a really, strong unit of people that I could fall back on. It's really all just been me taking chances and taking risks. And I've had the most amazing opportunities come to me just because I was willing to take the risk. And I wanted to put that into a character to show that you don't necessarily have to have, everything sorted. If you're willing to take a step, then doors will open if you trust. And this is what the character in the book, to a degree does. She leaves her country and she goes in search of, she's not quite sure what she's looking for at the beginning, but by the end she's found happiness in ways that she possibly at the beginning of the book wouldn't have quite understood.
Yeah, of course. And it also like the relationship she has with her sister, like how
Yeah.
it's sort of a counter, like a
Balance.
counter sort of balance, isn't it, between what she
It
could be and then what she's doing. So it's always clever to sort of see how that character is mirrored in some other person's life, even though she feels like she's happy, but her sister is kind of in her own sort of situation as well. So it's always nice to sort of look at those different lifestyles, isn't it?
It's every lifestyle, no matter what we're doing. There's ups and downs. Everybody has their own path to walk and challenges along the way. And I think it's important in stories to always include. You could write this amazing story about all of these characters that end up with the happy ever after. It's nice, but it's not really the reality, is it, of life?
No.
So there needs to be a degree of reality in there somewhere, just to remind people that whilst, one character's having an amazing time, the other one possibly isn't, having it so good, and that's totally fine because it's swings and roundabouts.
Absolutely, absolutely. So kind of like moving on, so obviously your writing process, how did you begin, or what do you do as part of your writing process? Do you just start writing, or do you plan your books, or
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a nightmare actually. I'll get an idea and I'll love the idea, and then I'll just sit at the computer. So for example, I say for now I've got a rough idea. Girl meets boy, and they're going to go live in Australia and have a baby there, and then they break up. Okay, that's all I have in terms of a plan. And then I'll just sit at the computer and. Basically, whatever comes into my head, I type, and it carries on like that until the end. So I have no clue what is going to happen in each scene. I've got no clue about secondary characters, no clue about what the actual main character will look like, what they'll be called. Like, there's no planning at all. It really is just sort of pantster mentality, just fly with it and see what comes. And I think actually that's maybe not the best way to be, but I feel it's a good way to be in a lot of senses, purely because if I'm surprised by what I'm writing, then I assume the reader would be too.
yeah, of course. As you said, it's just once you've got that basic idea, you normally just you have something come up to you, and then you just like start pouring it on paper, as you said before. But
Yes,
I said each author's different. Some people have different creative processes, and
of course.
yeah, I
I,
mean, yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I'd love to be a planner, honestly, because I think it would make my life a lot easier. Because there's been times where I'm writing something and it's great, and then I read back, possibly the next day, the next week, and I think, oh, this isn't really fitting with where I thought the story was going to go. And then, I've got a sort of cull about maybe 10,000 words. So yeah, I do think if you've got that planning aspect to your creative process, then you've probably got the advantage in some ways.
Yeah, of course.
I
That's.
don't have.
I wish I did too. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's definitely things that I've written that I've just gone, right, this sounds great at the time, and then I'm like, this is trash. This is utter trash.
This is the problem. It all sounds amazing until you read back a few months later and you think, what was I thinking? But no, there's always, I think everything's salvageable, right? So no matter what I write, even if I think, oh no, this doesn't fit with this particular story, I do save it into a document. And I like to convince myself that wasn't just words, wasted. So they're there. I've never, to be honest, gone back and used them for anything else yet, but they're there just in case.
Yeah, there's also something that another author told me, like that they sometimes get ideas and then they sort of mash other ideas together. So if it doesn't connect at the time, go, oh, I like this bit of this thing that I didn't actually go through. And then they put them all together. I'm like, that's quite clever,
Yeah,
actually.
that's a very good idea. I might have to start mashing some things together of what I've got in the rubbish tip at the moment. So see what comes from that.
The depths of the recycle bin, we all been there. Definitely. So, kind of looking ahead, have you got any sort of future writing plans at this precise moment in time? Or any other books that you'd like to sort of write?
Yeah, so I'm currently writing another women's fiction, similar style to the one that you've just spoken about. So similar style to Passport to Happiness. There's a travel aspect running through it. Easy read because I want to have an easy time writing as well as, the finished product, I always hope it's something that people can escape into. Possibly the audience I'm writing for is more the people that just need to switch off. And you know how you sometimes watch mindless TV, then I feel like if you've got a complicated book that you need to seriously think when you're reading it, I just don't feel that's the type of writing that I do. So yeah, an easy read that's a women's fiction with some travel involved is the next one that I'm currently writing. But I've just nearly finished a children's book, and my main work that I'm known for is I'm a psychic medium, so I'm very much into the spiritual aspect of everything, and I've just written like a spiritual self-help book. So that is another aspect that I'm going to be going forward with, but it wouldn't be, it will be under my real name, which is Carrie Batley, and I'll just keep my women's fiction under my pen name. It's my pen name, Carrie Stone.
Yeah, of course. You've got quite a lot of varied writing going on there.
Yeah, I love, well, just the type of person I am, I guess. I get bored if I'd have to do one thing and stick with one thing. That's not who I am. So I love to write in different genres, and I actually don't find it particularly difficult to to switch across to, for example, the children's book, and the spiritual one is second nature to me, so that's super easy. But yeah, I'd love to also do a psychological thriller, but it's at odds with the work that I do. So to get into that energy and that mindset, I wouldn't be able to, but I love reading them. So one day maybe I'll take some time out from my spiritual work and possibly give it a shot and see if it pays off.
Yeah, I think at the moment it's probably just good to like get an idea and read it, isn't it? And then it'll probably just come into you when you least expect it.
Yeah, that's it. I've got lots of ideas, as I'm sure every writer will tell you. The ideas are always there, aren't they? And it's just about picking the one that seems most prominent and just keeps repeating itself. So I just go with the one that I feel most drawn to at the time. But I really believe that once we have an idea, it becomes an energetic life force. So, we basically we sort of give birth to that idea, and it won't go away. And the more we think on it, the more energy we pour into it, the more it grows. So it really becomes something that has its own energy. And that when you read, as an example, Passport to Happiness, you're tapping into that energy of everything that I built up, and possibly the thousands of people that might read it will add into it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said about, the sort of light reads that anybody can just sort of pick up and,
Yeah.
Take with them. I think those are the best kind of books that they kind of remind me of that summer kind of feel when you go on holiday and you like pack your suitcase and like, you read those books just to sort of zone out, don't you? Like, you know, you're going on, just going, this is a book I can read, I can unwind to. And I think that's always good to have, because you don't really want to always take like a massive, like, big chunky book with you, do you? And just like go, this is so sad.
Yeah, you just don't want to be, you know, holiday is a time for relaxing. It's not for taxing reads that are going to leave you mainly drained, and possibly, you know, also some books you can read and they're a little bit depressing, and that's also something I try to avoid. I try to put a nice message throughout the book that's inspiring, because that all links back to the work that I do on a daily basis. So I think if you can have an inspirational message, and it's an easy read, that is personally where I find the most enjoyment when I'm reading for myself.
Yeah, of course, of course. So finally, this is a question I said, you know, I'd kind of remind you before, because it is quite a stump question for a lot of people. What's a book that you've read recently that you would like to recommend?
I've just finished Harriet Evans's new one, which is The Garden of Lost and Found, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. But I've also read quite a few from my own publisher, which is now called One More Chapter. And there's a few that have been published recently that are also amazing. So there's Zara Stoneley's new one. That was fantastic. Carmel Harrington has a new one out, and I've read that one, and I recommend that as well. I know you only told me one, but I just urge everybody to maybe go and look up the new ones that are being released, because I've read a few advanced copies, and I'd highly recommend if you're looking for something easy and, you know, lighthearted.
Definitely, definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I
Oh,
really appreciate it.
thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
No, it's been a pleasure talking to you as well. All right, well, have a great day.
Thank you, Emma.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
That's it for this week's episode. Thanks for listening. You can follow Carrie on Twitter at Carrie Stone UK. If you'd like to get involved with the podcast, you can get in touch through Twitter at NovelM16 and use the hashtag SlothCast, or you can send me an email at summerslothbooknook@gmail.com. You can also find our podcast on our YouTube channel, Summer Sloth Book Nook, or download from Podbean and Apple Podcasts for an on-the-go experience. See you next week. Bye.